Hi, this is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. It's November 15th, 2019, 8:04 p.m. And I put this together a couple days ago. It's for an astrophysics segment that I wanted to do. I'll let you watch some of it. All things are made up of smaller and smaller particles, but instead of existing like a cartoon, I don't know what, you see these things like the electron cloud around the nucleus and vastly amount of space in between and all this kind of stuff. But I say that if we could see it, that it would look very much like the regular world we're in. Maybe it would be planets. Maybe it would be suns. Maybe it would be, maybe an atomic bomb goes off that's really a bunch of supernovas. I don't know. But it would exist. It wouldn't be massively different. It's not like, they talk about building blocks. It wouldn't be like a bunch of kids' blocks. It would exist. It would have the same nature as when we look at stars and stuff like that. Maybe not exactly. Maybe it has a nature of its own, because maybe it's operating at a different level, but it would be just very much part of nature. Now, understand, I'm saying that even in nature that we see, okay, everything in nature is what we see around us and everything. There could be vastly different things to see. If I dropped you off on the North Pole, obviously things look different, and then on the moon or billions of light years into outer space, of course there's going to be drastic differences. But what they show us in their illustrations, their animations and stuff on YouTube, for instance, you see animations of atoms. You don't see actual atoms, and even what they call pictures, they look so manufactured. And I'm telling you, if you could get small enough, and get down to that level, or create a telescope that actually saw like a human eye at that level, then you would see it's the same real world as we have here. Now, I'm not going to say that at different microscopic levels, or whatever name you'd come up with them, ultrascopic, nanoscopic, that there might not be some very strange looking things, right? I mean, that's the nature of our world, right? You go into stranger and stranger places and you'll see stranger and stranger things, but they're not going to look anything like these animations that you see on YouTube. Or anywhere else. As far as that goes, I used to see these animation drawings in textbooks and stuff growing up as a kid in documentaries and things like that. But the real world is the real world at every level. There is no smallest. I've already explained. There's no smallest particle, biggest particle. Just keeps on getting smaller and bigger in both directions. As time has no end, back and forth. Space has no end. Goes on forever in every direction. So, like talking about this here, okay, would headlights work at light speed? Well, the answer is no, and the answer is we can't get up to light speed, and that's because, and this is not something you're going to hear, you'll be hearing this for the first time. It's because there are infinitely larger and smaller particles. Infinite. I mean, it doesn't end at a quark or a this or that. Those are made up of infinitely smaller particles too. And there's all kinds of particles in between. And electrons have mass. I even saw something somewhere where they said they were able to measure the mass of an electron. It was tiny, but it's a mass nonetheless. And anytime you talk about gases, like the gas of an electron cloud, you know, it's always just particles in motion, and that's what energy is. It's particles in motion, and I've already explained this to a lot of people. However, we may be moving at faster than light speed. Maybe we're in the arm of some guy somewhere, and he's walking along. Or maybe he only moves, 100 billion trillion times slower than we move on our level. I don't know. Maybe there is some kind of relationship between size and speed and time. If we were just an electron or an atom in a guy's arm, I don't know how fast he'd be moving in his life. Maybe he'd be moving just as fast as us. Maybe there's all kinds of, maybe there's an infinite number of relationships when it comes to speed. But if he were moving as fast as us, then we would be moving at who knows how many times the speed of light, right? But what it has to do with is relativity. Because if the particles in your neighborhood are relatively static in the way they move around and the speed they move around at, then obviously if you were trying to go the speed of light, it would be like, trying to fly into the wind. And obviously the faster the wind got, the more it would slow you down. But then on the other hand, if you were able to get into a relatively vacuous part of space, then there would be none of those limitations. Now, how vacuous am I talking about? So what I'm talking about here is relativity within my theory of infinitely larger and smaller particles. So how fast you could go would depend on the density and the number of particles you were trying to go through, right? My theory explains relativity, which of course has been beat down by quantum physics. I don't know. Obviously would have to be enough so that you didn't experience the resistance. And we're talking, if it was vacuous to say the size of an electron, that's all that was in there, or that and smaller. And then it comes down to a ratio, right? It all comes into play. I mean, let's say if the smallest thing in space in front of you was electrons, right? Or say something 10 times smaller than an electron. Okay, now most of this should go through you, right? But what if it was electrons with the density of black holes or super black holes or something like that? Super high density, then that would change it, right? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it still just passed right through you. Or maybe it passed through you until you hit the speed of light. And then it'd start weighing on you. Now, I don't pretend to know the answers, but I'm definitely asking the right questions, and I'm not proposing the wrong answers. I'm proposing possible answers, whereas, no offense, but a lot of what I see these days is it doesn't make sense in my theoretical universe, because my theoretical universe is infinite space, infinite time, infinitely smaller particles, infinitely larger particles, moving at infinite speeds. I still say that given the right conditions, there's all kinds of, and that's where we're going to find out how to move at faster than the speed of light. I'm willing to bet you. Okay, so you can watch this anytime you want by going to Progressive News Live with this video. I'm sorry that my computer I gotta say, these computers really do act on their own, and it had reset my recording level way down, and now I've got it turned back up. I've got a bit of a cold, so but you can watch that video and set it at the volume where you can hear it properly, but it was set down real low. But what I'm talking about there is what I call the ramifications of an infinite universe, infinitely smaller, infinitely larger, but they all work according to perceivable observation. Okay, they don't jump out into some kind of weird realm. I mean, these people, the people who are making millions off of this science, are basically operating in a fiction. They make up their own fiction, and they try and figure out how to prove it. And good for them. Everybody should be working on it. But they need to accept when when they get up on YouTube and they talk about their fiction as being real. That's when they step over the line, and they do it all the time. I mean, I could bring up something on quantum physics and show you video after video of them saying they're right when they're operating on their own fiction. They're basing their conclusions on their own fiction. So I operate very much within the realm of observable observation, and I really don't think that there's a universe outside of our universe that changes everything for us. I really think everything within our universe operates on the basis of size and density and quantity. Basic ideas that anybody can understand. I mean, I believe that my theories are solid because they're based on observation. And, when you want to leap beyond observation, you need to stick to what's observable and assume that what isn't observable operates on the same basic level as what is observable. So when you get down smaller and smaller to these particles that they talk about, everything's really happening. If you were there and you were able to see everything going on, you would say, hey, wait a minute. This is, within the boundaries of what we've observed in our own world, just at a bigger or smaller level. And you just have to think of the ramifications of observing at bigger and smaller levels infinitely. That's where you have to reach out beyond what we think about, because bigger and smaller particles moving at vastly faster than what we see in our universe are going to be strange to us. I'm not saying they aren't going to be, but they're not going to look like an animation. Okay? You're not going to suddenly be caught in Toontown, watching things. You're going to be in a real place, and you're going to see real things going on.
We get to sit on the sidelines and nitpick and wait for perfection. This is a moment to fight. This is a moment to find our fire and to find our fellow fighters. I think the real reason why I support Bernie is because I know that he's a fighter. I've known him for many years. I know where he comes from in this struggle. Someone once said to me, serious people have serious enemies. And in the fight for climate justice and for a livable future, we have very serious enemies. They have a lot of money, they have limitless money, and they have a lot of power. And we don't win against them unless we build a movement that is so powerful and so clear about the stakes of this moment and the fact that it is indeed a fight and that we have to fight for life. I think that the spirit of this campaign, of not me, us, of movement building, and of clarity, that we really are up against some very...
Smart girl, huh? She knows. But when she says that that they have unlimited money, she's talking about a place where money doesn't even matter anymore. It's simply a question of willpower, because they are not bound by money. If they want to sink billions of dollars, well, that's not much different than just being able to say, I want things to change my way, I want things to be my way. Because if you've got unlimited money, then you can do, within the confines of reality, obviously, do unlimited things. And they can do unlimited things in terms of the media. They can speak to millions, billions of people and convince all but the few that know, they've got their finger on the pulse of reality. They say, now wait a minute, and I don't think anybody knows what climate change really means. I mean, yeah, sea levels, blah, 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 but maybe we can turn the water in the oceans into drinking water. What the powerful are really very good at is not making resources available to the rest of us. So we want to know, how many trillions of gallons of water there are and where's it going and whether it's salty or not salty or polluted, right? I mean, this all started in the 60s when people became concerned about pollution, because at the basis of climate change and global warming and everything was really a basic movement at the roots level of people who were starting to become concerned about people who don't give a shit about them, right? So somebody builds a nuclear testing company with a facility, and then all their animals on their land start having thyroid disorders. This happened in southern Ohio while I lived there. There's a plant up there, and the Bushes and their friends, right, had decided to build a company out there where they would test these smaller nuclear weapons, not actually blow them up, but trying to create them. So they were very close to a nuclear reactor up there near Waverly, Ohio. And that place, I used to live near it, and every few months you'd hear the sirens going off, and it was because they were afraid that radiation had escaped. So this plant was very close to it. I have to think that it was working with the plant to develop the nation's small deliverable nuclear devices, right? So one of the rivers that runs off of that land, through that land, people down water, I guess, their animals started dying of all kinds of thyroid diseases. It was obviously, and some Swedish scientist was asked to come and test the water and the area, and he found, I don't know, beryllium or whatever, and he said, well, look, your animals are being poisoned by nuclear radiation. And so they demanded that because kids used to go down and fish and all this stuff, and they were very concerned, and some of the people started having these thyroid problems, and they demanded that they do something about it. And so they went down there and they put up a couple of signs. This, of course, was not enough, and the signs just fell over, or they were just not. I mean, that's not a proper response to radiation poisoning, right? And to this day, I doubt seriously that anybody's ever done anything about it. But the people who live there have probably left their land behind. I don't have the resources to find out exactly what's happened since then. I heard all this because I could pick up the local, like PBS type stations, and they were talking about it. By now, they're probably not allowed to talk about it, right? Because what the rich do, they have unlimited resources, right? So all they have to do is invest in all kinds of lives, all kinds of lawsuits, and scare people in other ways, right? And they can muddy the waters, and nothing ever happens except for the people lose their land, and maybe they get compensated or something. I don't know. But the point is it shouldn't be happening, right? This is how grassroots activism begins, right? Because the people, no matter how conservative they are, because southern Ohio is very much the home of, Christians, really strong right wing, Trump thumping, Bush lovers, and all that. And they even, to some extent, believe in that they owe their loyalty to them, and they're not going to, upset the cart because we need our small nukes, right? But when you lose your land and you lose your way of life, grassroots activism is born, right? So there's that. And that goes on here and there all across the country. People dealing with the... I mean, you're talking about the same place where DuPont spread CA across the world. I mean, you can even find it in Antarctica and places like that. It just spreads out, and it's permanently in our everything. And people are suffering the effects of it, but who has the resources to connect the dots, right? And even if they do, who has the resources to make enough of a fuss about it that it becomes an issue? I mean, I can take you up to southern Ohio and show you pumping stations that the cities and towns up there forced DuPont to put in. All they do is pump all day long, pump the water out of the ground, treat it, and pump it back into the ground. So, if there's not a problem, then why do they have to do that for like the next, I don't know how many years, but they're doing it now.
Batch engine 314, traffic collision, unknown of injuries, Broadway at 20th.
And of course, every commercial that you see is one way or another in opposition to what people like me and you are saying. They just fearmonger and offer alternate explanations as if they're God's own truth. So, and we have to build up an armor to that. We have to recognize that everything from your average TV show on every night that you love, no matter how much you like it, they're all designed to what's the word I'm thinking of here? To make you fit into their propaganda, their narrative, so that you're going along with the flow and you never really change anything, right? Oh, we've got free speech, but as soon as you say something that actually challenges the polluters or the oppressors, then they'll make sure nobody can hear you. So how is that free speech? I'm trying to figure out. So if I'm in an echo chamber that nobody can hear me in, I'm allowed to say anything I want. Where does that fit in with the idea of free speech? I mean, I thought free speech was supposed to be something that changed the world for the better. So people get to hear you say that the establishment is fucking them in the ass, and people get upset and change it, right? But not if you're stuck in a bubble.
Activist and author Naomi Klein has endorsed Bernie Sanders for president. Now, I want to show you just a part of her endorsement here. She endorsed him in Des Moines, Iowa at a rally. And the reasoning she gives here is the reasoning essentially why I support Bernie Sanders. So watch.
Here's the thing, we are not going to win the world that we need, not just the world that we want, but the world that we need, if we are kind of sort of in favor of it. We are going to have to be on fire for it, okay? And that is why I support Bernie Sanders to be the next.
Yeah, and literally the world is burning, and I don't see any scientists on NBC, CBS, ABC like showing proof that the world is burning because of climate change. Now, maybe it isn't, but wouldn't you like to see people who have who believe it is being given the resource that it is, and then if they can't come up with anything, that's fine, but at least they were given a shot. But we don't live in that world. We live in a world where those kind of people are just, and the only reason that they are even given ear is because we have this little bubble called the internet where we can get up and talk about it and put people on who support it and stuff. But I just talked about free speech. Let's see just how long this little bubble is allowed to have any kind of effect on the people and create a movement that actually creates change. Because if my theory is correct, that once it becomes enough of a thorn in the establishment side, I say we'll either be overwhelmed by a tsunami on the internet where we just become a voice in the wind, right? And the wind is them, and people, and they'll play their numbers game again, so that we end up becoming a minority, a tiny minority that basically doesn't achieve anything. I mean, I think it'll happen. I think it's already happening. I see where YouTube is getting ready to shut down channels that don't make them money enough. Well, will that be enough for them? Or will they also make sure that the Kyle Kalinskis and the Mike Figueiredos, I don't think they're worried about me, but they'll just shut me down because they can't make money off of me. Because why? Because nobody watches me. I mean, doesn't anybody out there feel like maybe people should be listening to me? I think that what I'm saying here is powerful stuff. I really do. I think I'm even more important. What I'm saying is more important than a lot of the stuff the other guys are saying. Because I tend to hit on really important points. The way that they're going to crush dissent is more important than anything. Because if you don't know how, then how are you going to stop it? I mean, if we get Bernie as president in 2020, will he make sure people like me and the progressive movement get a voice? I kind of doubt it. He doesn't come on my program. So I don't know. I mean, I'm not picking on Bernie. I mean, he's literally the best thing we've got going, and the best chance people like me have of getting heard.
Next president of the United States. Because Bernie understands that this is the fight of our lives, and yeah, we are up against powerful forces. And that means we need to organize an incredibly powerful movement to stand up to those forces. I could sit here and tell you why Bernie's Green New Deal plan is better than all the other candidates, and it is by far, but that is not even the real reason why I support Bernie for president. I support Bernie because there's no point in having a good Green New Deal plan if you're not building the movement to win it.
So that was perfect, and it's the exact reason why I support Bernie Sanders. I mean, there are, a million reasons to support Bernie Sanders, but when it comes down to it, what matters the most is, will you have a president that will fight for you and knows how to fight for you? So Bernie looks back. I mean, this is how he approaches this whole strategy of getting his agenda passed. He looks at history. How did civil rights get passed? How did the women's vote get passed? How did the New Deal happen? How did labor reforms happen? How did the weekend happen? I mean, we can go on and on and on. How did gay rights happen? You have to build a movement. If you don't build the movement, nothing's going to happen. Bernie Sanders has already built that movement, and he continues to build that movement, and he knows how to use that movement. He has said again and again and again how he will use the movement to put pressure on politicians to support his agenda. So whether it's Joe Manchin in West Virginia, where he'll go and rally his voters there and potentially even support a primary challenger against Joe Manchin if Joe Manchin still doesn't support his agenda like Medicare for all, whether it's that, or he goes to Mitch McConnell's state, goes to Kentucky and rallies voters there to put pressure on him to support an agenda. I mean, yes, I know it seems pie in the sky, especially for Mitch McConnell, but the point is here, it requires a movement of people to get this through. So Elizabeth Warren, while she is the second choice here, I would say, though far down the list in terms of second choice, she doesn't have that strategy. Elizabeth Warren is not going to challenge established powers. She's not going to challenge other Democrats. She's just not going to do it. She never has. Bernie Sanders has a history of this. He has a history of fighting, a history of supporting policies when they were unpopular at the time. So Bernie Sanders has a history of leadership. He has led on issues before they were popular. This is how you know he will support this agenda when he is still president, because he has always supported this agenda. It's not going to change. So when you're looking at candidates right now, and you look at who will fight for you, and on top of that, look, the discussion oftentimes with people seems to be who will defeat Trump. I think a lot of these candidates could potentially defeat Trump, but if you want to have that discussion, Bernie Sanders has the biggest lead against Trump in Iowa, in Michigan, in swing voter states where he won, many of them he won, in the 2016 primary against Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's hilarious this is never brought up in cable news.
Okay, I think David Dole is the best. He does a lot of Canadian stuff, and it's great too. But of course, it doesn't interest me as much as his American, and it isn't as relevant to my show. Although, really, it is operating on the same basis. And just like an English show talking about, the NHS, and we'll probably even, I still cover those things. Because they may be in a different place, but they're still talking about the same thing. You still got rich people fighting to destroy the lives of poor people. So what will be interesting to look at will be what kind of effect is David Dole putting out his videos, and I find them because I subscribe to the Rational National, and I always click thumbs up. Now I don't join because I don't have the money to join. I think it costs money. And these guys operate different from me. I don't collect any money. And I decided a long time ago that I wasn't going to take any money, not even from you guys. unless someday it becomes uh, a way to vastly promote the truth, you know, a way to promote justice and honesty. And then maybe I'll create a network that will do what I do, you know, but not for money. I just use the money to create the network and make sure it runs according to my way of thinking. So it'll be interesting to see, because remember my theory that I just pointed out, that they have freedom to speak until they start making a difference, and then they'll arouse the, you know, observation of the rich, and then the rich. So we'll see, you know, we'll see. I think this guy's the best. I think Mike Figueredo is second, but Mike is so obsessed with and not lately, I haven't seen him obsessed with LGBT. And don't get me wrong, I've been all my life fighting for LGBT rights. You know, I do have a problem with people. I really do, with people mutilating themselves, basically, and then asking for other people to pay for it on top of that. So that's another issue. I don't have a problem with their rights. I just think the whole thing is a really silly waste of time. Now, if you were born basically a woman, but technically you were a man, you had a penis and whatever, and, you know, it was affecting your life somehow, and medically you needed to, you know, just go the rest of the way and become a woman. I don't know. I mean, these things are so freaking complicated. I just, you know, I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to argue for people's rights, you know, without stepping on other people's rights. I mean, I understand how parents want to protect their children from basically, you know, being, because we all care about that, right? We don't want our kids to be persuaded in things that aren't true, right? So anyway, we'll worry about that sometime later, after I take the time to really delve into it again.
And what I'm so proud to say that this legislation is about is that it adopts the tenets of the Green New Deal, which is first to center frontline communities, those who are impacted most by the climate crisis. That is communities that are low income, communities that are communities.
Okay, to me this just muddies the water. I think that what's important is that everybody in this country be given a place to live, where it's safe, where it's warm in the winter and cool in the summer, you know, and they have access to transportation and stuff like that, because obviously the capitalist system is not doing the job, right? There wouldn't be millions of homeless people or whatever, people living in shelters or whatever, right? If capitalism was doing the job. And to blame it upon people being lazy is just outrageous. I mean, give them what they need and then see how lazy they are. And if they're lazy then give them some mental health. You know? I mean, if we need somebody to work, so, you know, people of working age, then if they're not willing to work, then obviously they have a mental problem, right? I mean, if you give them the opportunity to work in a normal job where they're not being harassed and they're not being told to do things that they shouldn't be told to do, and they're not being asked to do too much, stuff that affects their health and all kinds of whatever, right? Then if they're not willing to work, after you move them around a couple of places hoping to find them a boss that they like and a job that they can deal with, then it becomes a mental health issue. And like it or not, if you live within a system, you're not going to be free just to do anything you want. You are going to be required to work a certain portion of your life and do whatever. There's just reasonable things, right? We're not talking about crazy. We're not talking about capitalist crazy, because capitalism is crazy. I worked for my dad for 13 years, and he would tell people, I'll pay you $8 an hour, and you'll do whatever I tell you to do. That's no way to run a company. That's no way to employ people. People have to have a job description, and the employer has to work with it, and obviously the job description has to be reasonable, and the employer has to work within it. I can't tell somebody who I hire, well, you're just going to do whatever I tell you to do. I've got to outline what the parameters of that is. If it means coming over and mowing my lawn, then I have to include it. And then, of course, after that, as long as it's reasonable, right? After that, if the person has a problem with sticking to their job description, then they can quit and they can ask for a new job description, saying they don't want to do that. And, that's how things work in a reasonable world. But old guys like my dad, he's gone now, so it doesn't really matter. But there's millions of my dads, right? People running companies. And if they're narcissists, which I have to say many of them are just flat out racist, etc. But they don't want to be confined by reason, by fair, what is fair. They want carte blanche. They want people they can tell what to do. They want a pool of people who are desperate and will take, not everybody's, even though they are desperate enough, not everybody will take a job like that. But they know if they, again, it's a numbers game. They know if they have 10 million people or say 1 million people in their city, or maybe just 100,000 or 10, I don't care, that 1 out of the 10 will take their job. How is it legal to allow a system to go on where you get people to give away their rights, right? So they'll sign a contract saying, I'll agree to do anything you tell me to do. How is that legal? Just because people are that desperate, out of all the people who are that desperate, you'll find 1 or 2 within the group who are willing to work for you for a certain amount of time under those conditions. There's just no way to justify that system. It doesn't exist. That justice is not justice. And I have to say, I hate to plug myself, but unlike any of these other people, I have the experience of having to, as a good person, an activist, a just person, a fair person, come up through that very system. You know, being beaten all the way. And that gives me a rare perspective. Most people like me are conservative talk show hosts, and they have a different point of view. They think that's the way it is, and somehow that makes it right. Kind of might makes right type people. I've never felt that way. You know, I am the mouth that bites, the hand that feeds, and look where it's gotten me, right? They've definitely put me in a bubble.
Of color, native communities, rural communities. We're going to center them, and that's why we've decided to go with public housing first. Because public housing is infrastructure, and this is an infrastructure bill. So what we're going to do in this legislation is to do nothing less but to decarbonize the entire public housing stock in the United States of America. And in the process of decarbonizing the public housing stock, we are going to put hundreds of thousands of people to work in good paying jobs and giving that preference to public housing residents. In addition to decarbonizing our public housing stock, we're going to make sure that it is at the edge of technological innovation. It is not going to only decarbonize but produce renewable energy on site for the consumption of public housing residents. And then in addition to that, we are improving the quality of life. That is what this is about. So we're talking about ending food deserts and making sure that there's on-site groceries for residents. We're talking about making sure that there is good paying childcare services on site. This is how we show that tackling the climate crisis is an opportunity for us to create an economic stimulus and an economic boon, not just for Wall Street, but for working people. Because if anything, that's the mistake that we saw the last time around. The last time it was big banks that got a bailout. The last time it was Wall Street that got a bailout. This time, we're going to bail out Main Street. We're going to bail out the people. We're going to bail out the working class, make hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process, and show that we can have a people-centered economy while revitalizing our infrastructure and preparing for the future. Because what we're seeing at NYCHA is not just the criminal neglect, allowing children to drink, to be exposed to lead and having their brains poisoned, allowing people to experience criminally high rates of asthma because of the buildings that have not been retrofitted. It's not just about filling the gap to end the criminal neglect, but it's about leaping into the future and showing what our economy could look like if we centered working people. That's what this legislation is all about. And not only are we centering frontline communities in the legislation, but we're centering frontline communities in the process. That's why this legislation has been led not just by housing experts, not just in accordance to the climate science, but it is being led and authored and with the intake and input of public housing residents that are right here. That's why you all are here in Washington, D.C. This is not written by lobbyists. This legislation is not written by policymakers that are too far away from the pain. We've got people, because I believe that in addition to our housing experts, there is no one.
Okay, so I think that this is great, that the housing is the place to start, but I think that it has to be done very differently. I think that the vultures will swoop in, and that all the things that their experts aren't able to think of will be taken advantage of. For instance, I say that within reason, people should be responsible for their own recycling. I don't think there should be one garbage truck. I think that everybody should be able to clean their own garbage. So if you get a container full of cottage cheese, when you're done eating, you rinse that thing out, put it in a bag, pile up all your plastic in that bag, and you become an expert on how to get it ready for recycling. And you have your different bags or whatever of different types of plastic, so that when you take it to the recycler, it's valuable. These recyclers are making money off of our recyclables, and they're pretending like they're doing us a favor by picking it up. So on your way to work or on your way to buy your groceries, whatever, you drop it off either in special bins just for that. I mean, in Europe, when I was living in Brussels, they had on corners, special corners, you would find out where to go to drop off your wine bottles. I mean, literally, these things were full of wine bottles. So, I mean, they knew, but they get them for free. But I say no. I say you get paid back. Get paid for your, you paid for it, right? At the grocery store, you paid for the containers that stuff came in. You get paid for it. So, yeah. I mean, even if they came and picked it up at your house, I say they, weigh it, give you a thing saying it weighed this much, and then you take it to your bank or do it online, and you get money put into your account. And I don't even think we should have toilets, to be quite honest. I know this sounds gross to you, but I think that we should have systems where, like, you poop and then it seals it when you're done pooping, where you pee and it seals it so that there's no smell, and then at some point that's taken away, and man, poop is the ultimate fertilizer. I think every drop of water that comes into a person's house should be turned back into water, filtered, and the chemicals taken out of it. The chemicals are all, phosphorus is what's mostly in pee. I mean, nobody's really thinking along these lines, and it's because they don't want you to think along these lines. When we do start thinking along these lines, we're going to find out that there's a million ways that we're doing things wrong. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a use for every pollutant. So no matter what you're talking about, you can, through gasification, you can capture all the chemicals coming out, and they can be used. And this gets into things that I'm not willing to talk about, because quite honestly, in the world that we live in now, you guys, I think, deserve to know, but it'll get out to other people. I have solutions for all kinds of things. I mean, readily available. And it's just because they make us think in certain ways that nobody would they'd think I was crazy. But the fact is they will work. And I'm not going to get into it, because I'm not giving up that stuff. I consider it too valuable to our communities to let the conservatives, the establishment, the oligarchy, I guess we'll just call it the oligarchy, have it. They'll just bury it anyway, right? So what's the point? When Bernie and AOC and the people become powerful enough I will give it to them, okay? But I'm not willing to give it away right now. You know, people who this idea that we can throw away good ideas like dreamers just because a president comes and goes. I don't think our system should facilitate crushing people. I mean, they're just crushing people. Dreamers, you know, they already got their deal, and then here comes along Ronnie Rump, you know, Ronald Reagan, Ronnie Rump, and he's going to crush their dreams. There should be limitations to how much damage you can do to people by taking away what was promised to them.
This is their home. Home is here. They don't know anywhere else who the United States has their home, and we won't stop until they're welcome here.
The young people who are in DACA, please do not think for one moment that you are being deserted.
And we want a pathway to citizenship because this is our home and this is where we want to stay because we're Americans and we live here.
We have worked hard for this. We work hard all the time, you know, through school, you know, through our communities.
Today defines our future. Even though a piece of paper doesn't define who we are as people, but
I'm very sad that it's come to this where we have to come and fight for our humanity before the Supreme Court because it just seems crazy to me that we have to keep fighting.
Okay, let me be clear. People like this who've learned to speak English and people who would like to learn to speak English, and okay, but there's a limit. I'm telling you. We do not live in a world, you know, we do not live in the past. We don't. We live in the future, and in order to, and I think you all should consider this, right? When I say to you, okay, well, if you want all those Mexicans down at the border and Hondurans, and I admit that the United States has created situations in South America, you know, and that's wrong. But at the same time, when you're faced with the reality of the situation, when I say to you, okay, but they'll stay at your house, and all of a sudden you'll start backpedaling, I know you will. My point being that if you look at everything with the climate crisis, with unemployment, not unemployment, because shitty jobs, shitty, lousy, you know, people that are homeless and all that stuff, right? Can you honestly say we can afford? Can you honestly say that you can afford to have a tsunami of people? Because if you open the borders, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a tsunami of people, and we're all going to have to deal with it. Now, can we take that tsunami of people and turn it into a workforce that creates not only a solution for itself, but continues to help build the country that we want to build? Well, if that's the case, you're not going to do it with the Republicans, you know, with the conservatives, with the oligarchy. If they're in charge of everything, all they'll produce is large pools of poverty so that they'll have people of poverty to pick from. So I'm still for, to a certain extent anyway, just holding them off. Just saying, look, our country is not ready for, I mean, if we break our country before it solves its own problems, before we take over and basically push the oligarchy out of economics and politics, which if you watch my program, which I know you don't, but, well, you do, but the millions of other people, then you would know that we have to beat the oligarchy, get them out of politics, get them out of economics, before we can. First we have to do a study, and we have to have solid science saying how many people we can let in, and how they can create not only their own world, a better world for themselves. Because, if you're from outside the United States, your coming in here isn't about making things better for you. It's about making things better for everybody here. And if we can't do that, if it's just going to lead to the destruction of progressives as well. I mean, this movement is everything. We can't have it destroyed by poverty and misery. And the oligarchy will immediately do that. They will immediately create whatever situation they need to create to make it bad for us. If it means just, okay, the narrative, creating the narrative, look at how the progressives have destroyed the country. We can't do that. We have to make it better. And we need to make it better in a way that is sustainable, in a way that we can prove it to everybody. Because look at places like Venezuela. Okay, they cut poverty in half, but the oligarchy is able to make it seem like they doubled poverty in the country. Oh, people are no water, no running water, no food, no this. And they're able to actually do that, create a situation where there's no food, there's no water, and then on top of that they've got the propaganda machine to try and prove that it's all Maduro's fault, right? We certainly don't want to go that route. Now, in his case, he has no choice. I mean, he's got millions of people to think about. But I think we can do it better than he did. Of course, we don't have an America, the United States, bearing down upon us like he does. But we will have our oligarchy bearing down upon us, and that's what we see, right, every day. Establishment Democrats, establishment Republicans, their vast machine of capitalism is bearing down upon us, and they haven't even started yet. I mean, what we're seeing now is just the beginning.
Hi, I'm John Carter. I'm the founder and CEO.
So it appears like the establishment is panicking, and now they might be throwing their hopes and their money behind one Deval Patrick. Now, this is Deval Patrick. If you don't know who he is, fear not. I will update you. So, Jeff Zeleny tweeted the following. This guy's from CNN. New former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick is telling friends and allies in phone calls today that he has made a decision to run for the Democratic nomination for president. Two people familiar with the matter tell CNN, and is poised to make it official by Friday or sooner. So, there's your answer. He was the governor of Massachusetts, and he's been a long time Democratic establishment insider. And I want to give you just a few little facts about his record and about who he is, so we can, make up our mind at this very early date. Now, again, keep in mind, the whole reason why he's running is, well, obviously personal ambition is one thing, and I'm sure that's a big part of it, but an even bigger part of it is, no, you don't get it, the establishment is panicking. And they're now realizing, kind of like the Republican establishment realized in late 2016, late in the race in 2016, they were like, oh, it looks like Trump might actually win this thing. Because if you remember, and it was glorious to watch all this unfold, but they threw everything they had at him. At first, it was like, okay, people, we have Jeb Bush running. Aren't you excited for another Bush? Isn't he so charismatic? Isn't he such an accomplished politician? So they threw Bush out there. That didn't work at all. Even with all the media chatter and speculation pumping him up and acting like he's great, he became irrelevant rather quickly. Then they were like, oh, God. Okay, maybe Rubio. Marco Rubio. You like Marco Rubio? He's young. He's a young guy. His last name is Rubio. Dare we say he's a person of color? They tried to throw Rubio out there. That didn't work very well either. Trump destroyed him. They even went to John Kasich as another option, like, oh, yeah, no, very serious Republican, all about the deficit. Maybe he did a good job as governor. Do you like that? That didn't work. In fact, one of the funniest parts of the campaign was John Kasich bragging after he got like second place in a primary or third place. And everybody was like, what are you doing? And the media was like, oh, yeah, serious candidate. He didn't win, but he was close to maybe winning one contest, so him, maybe. And then it even got to the point where they were like, Ted Cruz. Yes, Ted Cruz, we'll take him over Trump. Please just don't pick Trump. And then what happened, we all know. Donald Trump destroyed Ted Cruz as well. So now the Democratic Party's in a similar situation. They're trying, man. They got, Howard Schultz was threatening the independent run. You got Tim Ryan. You got John Delaney. You got Amy Klobuchar. You got Mayor Pete. You got all these centrists. Biden, who now the establishment has decided he ain't going to last. In some polls, he's still leading. But the establishment has decided it don't look good for Biden. So they're panicking. And they need somebody. And they're flinging mud against the wall and hoping something sticks. And now they got Deval Patrick. And they think, oh, this guy's good. He's a minority, a person of color. They had Kamala, but Kamala, of course, imploded in a legendary fashion. She's now at 1% in some polls in the early states. Hilarious. But now they're going with Deval Patrick. And they want to try to make him, the flavor of the month. And it's not going to work.
And of course, Bernie Sanders won't go away. Elizabeth Warren is still their great white hope. And she's not working out. She's dropping. She never was up there. It was just an illusion created by the lamestream media. And this guy won't. He won't do it. He may attract a bunch of black people who are stupid. They just can't get it. They can't understand that Bernie is the real thing. And maybe they don't even like the real thing. Some black people, because there's a certain demographic who actually is conservative and likes to hang their hopes on their chances with a conservative, with the status quo.
First of all, even, I get it. Our system is wild and crazy, but this is a super late entrance into the race. I mean, it just is. Michael Bloomberg, Deval Patrick, this late. No, everything is kind of solidified, and we have so many candidates running. So, what do you think? You're going to appear out of nowhere and all of a sudden skyrocket in some polls in Iowa or New Hampshire? No way. You don't even have the name recognition yet. I mean, the media loves you, and they'll try to pump you up, but you probably no ground game, all that stuff. But even more important, his record is abysmal. So let me walk you through some of that. As governor of Massachusetts,
I will bet you that his ability to raise money through the establishment, through the oligarchy, is only asset.
Massachusetts, he secured $1 billion in tax breaks and subsidies for pharmaceutical and biotech companies. So, I mean, you want to talk about just the epitome of a corporate Democrat. There you go. He also increased the sales tax by $1 billion. Now, I need you guys to understand something. There's this caricature, this stereotype of Democrats is like, oh, they want to tax and spend lefty. That's what you are. And it's like, well, no, I've said on this show, and I'll continue to say it, I don't think I've ever met a middle class tax increase that I like. Now, don't get me wrong, when it comes to like Medicare for all, since you're eliminating the private tax, which is premiums, copays, deductibles, and that's more, and you're raising public taxes, but it's less, that's a middle class tax increase that makes sense. But it's because the net cost for a middle class family goes down, so they save money. But like, you know, any kind of cost that is or any kind of tax that's legitimately regressive and impacts working people more than the rich, I'm not a fan of. Well, Deval Patrick is, and that's exactly what this is when he increased the sales tax by $1 billion. So he's kind of feeding into that, you know, the stereotype, the caricature of Democrats and people on the left as like, all they want to do is tax you and take your hard-earned money. And, well, when you're increasing the sales tax by $1 billion, that is an issue. But now here are the most important points. His record in the private sector. So after leaving the government, you know where he accepted a job? You're going to love this one. Bain Capital. Now, that might sound familiar to some of you, and the reason it does is because that's Mitt Romney's vulture capitalist company, where he was caught on camera. I don't think he even knew a camera was on, where he says, yeah, we harvest companies and then, like, sell them for profit. So this is like the, you know, the blood-sucking vulture capitalists that everybody hates. He went to go work for Bain Capital, that company. And then also, he worked for AmeriQuest. And his record with AmeriQuest is disastrous. AmeriQuest is one of these companies that was heavy into the subprime mortgage loans, which of course led to the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. And Deval Patrick was viewed as like the fixer for corporate America. So if there was ever instances with some companies of their allegations of racial bias, he swoops in, he tries to help them save their reputation, they pay him a tremendous amount of money. You know, with AmeriQuest, they were predatory in targeting families of color. And Deval Patrick was on the side of the predatory guys. So he likes to paint his picture as like a rags to riches story, or tell his story like it's a rags to riches story. But no, it's really like a perfect example.
Yeah, and you know, wearing a blue shirt with no tie, I'll vote for him. I mean, that's all it is, right? I mean, it's just a facade. Fake front to convince the people who are naive to support the status quo. So, you know, and you know, going back to what I was talking about housing, because people like this are not ever going to understand or help work with it, but I look at people who own normal size houses, you know, ball homes, U.S. homes, and they heat their whole house in the winter, even though they're only using one or two rooms, right? Or if, say, individually, they're really only using one room. I'm sitting here, I do not use my big heat pump system. I get under the covers when it's freezing cold, and I use this little blow dryer to warm myself up. I mean, my footprint is tiny, and if I could do it with solar panels, but I can't afford solar panels yet, but I'm probably going to buy some in the next month or two. Hook them up to batteries and hopefully do most of what I do off of those batteries. I mean, these are the kind of things we need to be working on. Because if it turns out that the capitalists have a broken system that only take care of themselves, right, and leave the rest of us out in the cold, so to speak, then we're going to have to develop a system in the beginning where everybody's going to have to tighten their belt and come up with ingenious little ways, like my little hair dryer under the covers here, warming up my hands so that I can, use my mouse. And, I mean, I even really use my computer to warm my room. I have all of my cooking stuff in my room. I make my tea in my room. I don't go down into a heated kitchen to do all that. We're going to have to use that kind of brilliance for the interim, to get through the rest. Now maybe later we can find a way to provide everybody with heated houses, that bleed energy and everything, but in the meantime we're going to have to come up with other ways to do things. Of course, there's another solution. There really is. There's always another way to do things, like
bullies inflate prices, gouge us, spend.
It's been
like the way we do it.
Obvious for years that we live in a very divided nation. I mean, even this past Halloween, we found that there are people who are well-adjusted, normal Americans, and people who think black licorice tastes delicious. But I was pretty sure the one thing everyone could agree on is that our nation's children, especially our poorest, should all...
By the way, black licorice is delicious, but it's bad for your heart, so be careful.
always have health care, which is why we have the Children's Health Insurance Program. Signed into law in 1997, the Children's Health Insurance Program, better known as CHIP, was a bipartisan effort of retired Republican Senator Orrin Hatch and late Democratic Senator Ted Kennedy. It was a safety net for kids whose families made too much money to qualify for Medicaid but couldn't afford private health insurance. But thanks to lawmakers who've made it their mission to gut social safety net programs that help the less fortunate, that net has a few gaping holes. Holes so huge that today, more than 1 million children across the country are no longer covered by Medicaid and CHIP. It is the first enrollment decline in a decade. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services is directing state CHIP programs to constantly reevaluate family incomes to determine if they're still eligible for health care. For families, this means dealing with mounds of extra paperwork as complicated as the feelings of Washington Nationals fans who watched Ryan Zimmerman give Trump his own jersey. In many cases,
So heal thyself, patient. I mean, that's basically the oligarchy's solution to, the broken monetary system that they own and control. And, they squeeze out little bits to the people. Heal thyself. I mean, we've seen this all along, right?
Families who miss out on key pieces of mail about how to stay enrolled because of a change in address or employment are at risk of being dropped from coverage. Like in Colorado, where state officials decided families could be dropped if as much as one piece of mail is returned by the U.S. Postal Service, which has made family mail retrieval an all-hands-on-deck effort. As a result of this mail scam, from May 2017 to May 2019, enrollment in Medicaid and CHIP dropped 8.5% in the state, more than 3 times the national decline of 2.5%, according to a congressional advisory panel. A single piece of...
I mean, we have a system. You know, people go down to the offices where you get CHIP and Obamacare and all this stuff, and they provide all their credentials, all the paperwork, and talk to people. But they found a way around all that. It's really pathetic.
Returned mail? Do you think Sally Mae gives up after a single piece of returned mail when you owe them money? To them, you're Luke Skywalker, and they're a fleet of stormtroopers ready to hunt you to the ends of the universe for your new address. Another reason for the drop in CHIP enrollment is a White House proposal to deny green cards to immigrants.
And I'll tell you one thing, the online, website, like in Kentucky, it's, whatever, Benefind, or they like go out of their way to hold on to your old address. And now I know why. Because they can use it to cut you off. I mean, I had to call and go down there repeatedly in order to get them to purge. And actually, my old address is still in the system. I still get a little red thing saying, you need to change your address, even though I've been through this a million times. But fortunately, I've done enough that they can't cut me off based on that. But they sure as hell have tried.
Who use public safety net programs. This makes families scared to seek out CHIP or any benefit that can help lift people out of poverty. But the most concerning part of all is the fact that CHIP was never a permanently funded program. It still relied on Congress to reauthorize it, which meant every few years, lawmakers would ask themselves the question, do we still like poor kids enough to give them health care? And up until 2017, that answer was usually yes, as long as it wasn't this kid.
Open it up for me.
No!
2017 saw CHIP on shaky ground after Congress didn't reauthorize the program funding for 4 months. While millions of kids' health care was in limbo, Republicans refused any deal to extend the program that didn't include cuts to the Affordable Care Act and Medicare. Because I guess they thought, hey, why should divorced parents be the only ones who get to use kids as a bargaining chip? Was CHIP finally reauthorized? Yeah. But will even more children continue to get kicked off the rolls? Absolutely. And after more than 20 years of assurances that these kids would be covered, Americans finally realized that instead of funding CHIP permanently, politicians would rather play partisan politics before their kid gets an inhaler for an asthma attack. All while people like Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services Administrator Seema Verna tweeted that fewer people are on public assistance because under President Trump's leadership, the American economy is thriving. If there are fewer people relying on public assistance, it's because this administration went out of its way to create roadblocks of bureaucracy, bullshit work requirements, and fear-mongering. And no one, especially a kid, deserves that.
Yeah, I gotta say, these work requirements, which thank God Matt Bevin is going to be looking for a job on January 6th or whatever. But they keep on trying to tell me like I have to worry about it. Like in 6 months when I come up again, I'm going to have to meet the work requirements when they never did it in the first place because they can't. Somebody's going to notice that what they're requiring is that they work for free for their choice of charity or work in a shitty job where they know who you are and they're not going to like you because of who you are. And when you get right down to it, okay, let's say you get $200 a month in food stamps, but they make you work, I don't know what it is, 20 or 30 hours a week, with no pay, and you take that $200 and divide it up by the number of hours, and you've got way below minimum wage. So, I mean, this whole thing is a farce. It's a joke. It's just another Republican joke. But the Republicans are facilitated by the establishment Democrats. So it's the oligarchy that's at work here.
An Egyptian man has pursued his dream of a greener life by constructing a house entirely from recycled materials.
I gotta say that, you know, these people, don't they have enormous resources to be able to do this? Aren't they basically rich? They're not offering solutions for the rest of us. They're just saying, oh, I've got a hobby, I'm going to make my house out of trash. And they put an enormous amount of money into it, and the fact is it's not realistic for the rest of the people, and it's being used as just a kind of propaganda.
They slow down, you slow down.
Yeah. These ads are pretty funny sometimes. I mean, driverless cars aren't really happening, and nor are they probably going to happen for a while. They could, and they'd be a great thing, because really, human beings are not qualified to drive. All you have to do is look at the statistics on deaths and injuries. It's a, you know, it's a metal killing machine.
Transformational policies that will change your life. So here it is. A Labour government will make broadband free for everybody.
And this is necessary. It's necessary for us to build our network. We're the vast majority of people. And if we connect everybody and give people like me and a place to speak, and also if we create a system where it makes it super easy to vote, you know, all you have to do is get online and you can learn all the details about the important issues and vote on them, and vote on your representatives and keep track of whether they're keeping their promises. And I mean, even people like Jeremy Corbyn have to be monitored and held accountable. I mean, that's what happened in with Obama, is there was a network, although it was loose and it was relatively underdeveloped, but it was there. We all got together online and we started saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, he's not doing what he said he'd do. And we started demanding that people hold his feet to the fire. This is what's necessary on a vastly more developed scale.
And not just any broadband, but the very fastest.
Why is it snowing? Is he outside?
Full fibre broadband to every home in every part of our country for free as a universal public service. And once it's up and running, instead of you forking out your monthly bill, we'll tax the giant corporations fairly. I hope they're listening to this. We're going to tax you fairly. That includes Facebook and Google. That will help to cover the running costs of this. This is a policy for the many. Making broadband free and available to all will open up opportunities for everybody. What was once a luxury is now an essential utility. That's why full fibre broadband must be a public service, bring communities together with equal access.
Yeah, and whether Facebook and Twitter and these guys like it or not, we have to have a version of them which would put them out of business because they wouldn't be able to compete, that is available to us so that we can, we're at one point email was the only way to communicate over the internet, and then we found out, well, we can create these sites where people are able to, like public forums and everything, so that people are able to communicate more smoothly. Waiting for an email and half the time, you send it and it doesn't go through and stuff like that, that turned out to be a very, kind of bad way. But here, I can talk to my friend Athy, who I've been friends with since the 80s, and in real time. And look what he sent me. He sent me something from Jeremy Corbyn. How serendipitous. And these things can only be achieved on the internet. Right? This is a place where I can go and I can instantly get information and send information to people in a network. And it's broken. We all acknowledge the fact that Facebook's broken, that Facebook fucks with us, and excuse me, I didn't mean to say that, but why can't I say it fucks with us? Isn't that crazy? But I'm worried about, and why should I worry? Nobody's watching my program, but you might watch the video later. You might want to, and all it does is gives YouTube, Google, whatever, a chance to fuck with me, right? And they shouldn't be allowed to fuck with me because I say fuck. Fuck them. I've got they put in a rating system. I've said that it's this show is not appropriate for children, and I'm sure that they're going to make that clear in the video that's made out of this. So why should I have to worry? Oh, but I have to worry because I don't have enough viewers, and they're going to decide whether my channel can exist or not. Don't worry though, they're not going to get rid of my account, and I can broadcast my videos on YouTube to other platforms. But they can make it difficult for me on YouTube if they don't like what I have to say. Now, I don't know why anybody would have a problem with what I have to say, other than their virgin ears having to hear the F word from time to time. And it's not like there's not plenty of people like Jimmy Dore and other people who use the F word all the time. But we need this, I need Facebook in a basic way. And it shouldn't be dependent on Mark Zuckerberg, whoever the fuck he is, or anybody else, It should be dependent upon the laws of the country. If somebody has a problem with what I have to say, they should just be able to, and I talked about this last time, we don't have a justice system. That's our big problem. It's not whether or not we want these corporations or these people who manage to monopolize our basic system for communicating with people. There should be a Facebook that isn't owned by Mark Zuckerberg or his, army of trolls or his automated programs. It should be, it should be outside of the utility. You should have to go to if we could get justice out of the justice system, you would go to the justice system, you would file your charges, they would get looked at by experts who are unbiased to decide, because really all of this justice stuff is just, mathematical. It's just based on basic things that we've proved over and over again. So, if you're threatening somebody or if you're trying to hurt somebody, then you go to the justice system. They go to the justice system and they file their charges, and then their charges are reviewed. And if they merit, then there's a trial. And no more juries. We need expert juries, not juries, because juries are so easily manipulated. I mean, they threw me in jail just for doing what I'm doing right now, just for talking about how angry they make people. And so, that's really the whole solution. I don't know why we're trying to... Well, yeah, I do know why. I know why the oligarchy is the oligarchy. I know why they are the way they are. Greed, right?
In an inclusive and connected society, fast and free broadband for all will fire up our economy, deliver a massive boost to productivity, and bring 500,000 people back into the workforce. It will help our environmental issues and tackle the climate emergency by reducing the need for commuter journeys. And it will make our country fairer, more equal, and more democratic.
Hi, we're Brooklinen, and we make ridiculously comfortable sheets. The best sheets on the planet.
Introducing Scald, Oxydynamic Fat Scorcher, opening up a new class in high-intensity nutrition.
Hey everybody, welcome to Moment of Clarity Viewer Questions. These are your questions, your comments, and if you want me to respond to yours, then feel free to leave them under this video. And every week we pick 2 people to win my comedy special, and I will list the 2 winners from last week. Anybody who comments can end up winning. This is from Biff Webster talking about on the latest episode of Common Censored, my podcast, we talked about the blackouts in California and PG&E, the electric company there that's gone bankrupt, and now they're talking about making it a public asset rather than a private company. But Biff Webster says, we dealt with the blackouts and had to toss, so he's in California. We dealt with the blackouts and had to toss food out and get ice and use candles and all of that crap. And when we tried to get updated information from PG&E, it was always a vague response. The word indefinite was used. We were also told that every power line had to be inspected before the power could be restored. But when we contacted a family member back east, a person who works for the power company, we found out that checking every power line was not necessary to reinstitute power to consumers. That if there were lines down, it could be seen, at least back east, on their computer grid. So yeah, I mean, I can't speak to whether PG&E is able to do that or not, but in general, we're in this situation because of a toast. It is true. We couldn't find verification whether Salvador Allende loved or hated avocado toast, so we just made something up. And I apologize. Sometimes you gotta do that in our show. But anyway, he's saying the Chile segment on neoliberalism was accurate. Here is Mark Gigil. You won't see this on the evening news, meaning the Chile segment. It's actually happening all over the world, except in the USA, where the people aren't suffering enough quite yet to stop looking at their phones. I mean, the sullen meerkats is very engrossing. It's tough to look away. Because, I've got like 6,000 points on sullen meerkats, and I'm not gonna go to a protest if I'm on the brink of level 12. You kidding me? Mark continues, The only journalists left are on the internet. Turn off the TV. They did a study and found people that watch Fox News are less informed about the truth than people who watch nothing at all. That's true. They did do that study, and to me, that's fucking hilarious. It's amazing that there could be a news station that makes you less informed, and people keep watching it. You'd think that would make them seem very dumb, and it does, and yet people still keep watching it. And the same goes, granted, I would argue that there are certain aspects of the truth that maybe CNN or MSNBC might do better than Fox News. For example, CNN and MSNBC or NPR will acknowledge climate change is a thing, whereas Fox News pretends it's not. But CNN, MSNBC, and NPR, they have spent 40 years ignoring climate change. And now they've just started waking up to it. So, is that much better? Barely. All right, Mr. Shiggity. Oh, and actually, if you watch the redacted pre-show segment that I did this week, Fox News owners, News Corp, that do the Wall Street Journal, they had almost the exact same article as the New York Times on their cover on the same day, last Tuesday. A News Corp, a Fox News entity, had the same article as the New York Times. So as you can see, these things aren't that different. Fox News and the New York Times, a lot of overlap there, especially on foreign policy. All right, Mr. Shiggity, unfortunately, the baby boomers in the USA and the UK are still hyper addicted to their big brain daddy, Milton Friedman's debt doesn't matter voodoo economics. Milton Friedman is the father of,
Not all of us. Not even remotely. I mean, I'm a communist. I don't hardly listen to what Milton Friedman has to say.
Neoliberalism and all that bullshit that has destroyed so many people's lives. Trump and the boomers are going to record yearly debt, and they aren't stopping. Boris and the UK Brexit boomers are going to record stupidity day by day. The boomers worship Reagan and Thatcher. That's just a fact. Stealing the future's money. You're now seeing the result of the largest intergenerational theft in human history. He's absolutely right. I'm assuming it's a he because the Mr. in Shiggity. But he's absolutely right. It is a massive theft of the entire wealth of the world. And part of the reason that, white people go, why can't we go back to the golden years of like the 50s where everybody could have one job, you could take care of a family.
Yeah, where black people lived in shacks out in the middle of nowhere with no running water and no, maybe they were better off. Maybe you're right. I'm just kidding.
Family, have a house, a car, all of that on one job. Pretty much everybody had a job. Why don't we go back to those golden years? White people, again. And what they don't take into account is, first of all, as I'm joking around by saying white people, that was golden years for a specific group of our society. But beyond just that, that was a time when industry and the number of human beings on the planet and production and everything, especially in America and certain other countries, it was all there. It was all there for the taking. There was enough materials to just endlessly exploit. There was enough room and it just could be. It allowed the enrichment of basically everyone in a large degree. And so you could have a society like that. Nowadays, you have fewer and fewer resources, fossil fuels, we're way past peak oil, right? Not to mention climate change, you can't keep burning it like this. We're killing all the forests, we're in the middle of the 6th grade extinction, we've lost...
I would disagree with him there. I think the oligarchy is holding back. I think they're holding us all back.
50% of all wildlife in the past 40 years. So we're past that point that you could just exploit endlessly and just succeed. And now it's into a killing kind of cycle that it slowly goes back down where we destroy everything unless we change our ways. And in a larger sense, we're in a post-scarcity world. People don't have to be hungry. They have to be hungry in the system we have. So we throw away 40% of all food. If that were distributed correctly, nobody in America would be food poor, food insecure.
See, the oligarchy.
It wouldn't exist. But we don't live.
It's not a lack of resources. If we scientifically put this under a microscope and studied it, we would know. But the oligarchy doesn't even let us do that. They have their own scientists. They say what they want, and they propagandize us with that.
We live in a system like that. We live in capitalism that is meant to, you all decide who can grab the most by exploiting others, and that's how the system works. So we're in a post-scarcity world if we wanted to use it, but we don't. We just want to keep seeing if we can beat the shit out of the other guy to get enough of the shit we want. Let's see.
Right, they keep us fighting amongst ourselves. They keep that propagandized population totally oblivious to the realities of the situation.
Some last comment, smart devices. This is on the smart devices segment we did. D. Clyde says, for at least 5 years, Harry Shearer has been sounding the warning on these so-called smart devices on the threat to privacy they pose. Not just from landlords and police, but from random strangers. I will never have one in my house. It is true, and I don't need to, again, explain all the privacy concerns, I don't think. But the problem is it's not just smart homes. It's going to be everything. Like, everything is going to be... We already have an Internet of Things, right? Your fridge now can tell you you're out of things. You're at the store, and it's saying, hey, buy eggs. And your toaster can be like, well, I don't like bread anymore, or whatever. Things can speak to you, and they're all...
And the oligarchy can keep track of you with those things.
Collecting data on you. And
I mean, if your landlord installs these things, you really think they're doing it for your benefit?
Information, and that is all being collected, as we now know, by our NSA. So the...
And really, landlord... I mean, we're going to elevate them to religious hierarchy status. Well, they've already, elevated themselves to that point, and they justify everything they do based on that concept. I mean, are we really satisfied with that concept? There are lords. I mean, I think most Americans would be out on the streets with pitchforks, because that's all they'd be allowed to carry anyway. Household items, if they accepted the fact that they've got landlords, people who think that they're, religious icons, not vultures, vampires.
The privacy concerns are not just, like, you don't have to have Alexa sitting there. You don't have to just have Google Home to have massive privacy intrusion. Our TVs, we found out the CIA can turn on smart TVs. You don't know they're turned on. They don't come on. They're just internally on. And they are recording everything you're saying and analyzing it. So if you speak around your TV, that could go to a database. That could easily, right now.
And the way I got thrown in jail was because I didn't know that they were recording me over my cell phone. They said I was on hold, but guess what? They were recording me. And I don't have a problem with anything I've ever had to say. If you want to point out something that I shouldn't have said, I'm more than willing to look at it. I'm more than willing to let experts look at it and decide whether what I said was right or wrong. But I don't think me complaining about the oligarchy and saying that they're doing so much that people want to kill them. And I don't mean, 99.9% of the people who say they make them so angry they want to kill somebody. That's not really, they're not really saying they want to kill somebody. They're saying that in that instance of anger that comes from the injustice and the unfairness, which are the same thing, really, they get that feeling. But when you have 1 million people, that's going to translate into violence. Okay? That's going to translate into terrorism. And that was my concern in the segment I was working on. They take it and turn it around to me threatening to blow them up or kill them. Really? You're going to say that my moments of anger, so like when I hear about or when I'm treated really unfairly, or when I hear about somebody else who's treated unfairly, like say this guy who is in Texas who they're thinking about executing, who shouldn't even be in jail because they don't have a case against him. And yeah, I get real angry, you know, when I think about those things. And I'm sure he gets really angry, but he's sitting in a jail cell, you know, locked up in a maximum security prison, no doubt. That kind of anger on a massive, you know, numbers of people, millions of people who are angered every day is going to translate into violence somewhere, somehow, you know. And that's all I was talking about. And you're going to tell me I can't talk about it. So, I was talking earlier about being in a bubble, and when you draw their attention, you're only outside of the bubble in so much as they're paying attention to you. And what do? They throw you in jail for 3 months. There, that's going to teach you a lesson. I'm definitely not as angry as I was now that I've spent 3 months in jail.
Now maybe they're only looking for you to be anyone who says, hey, I'm thinking of bombing the guy next door with a big old bomb. Maybe they're only looking for that right now, but if they ever decide to spy on you for some other reason, if you become critical of the state and you need to be checked on, then they're able to do that through your television. So I'm just saying, it's not just the smart TV, smart devices. It's not just Alexa. It's not just Google Home. It's not just fucking Carl the Roomba. It's everything. And unless we come up with rules to abide by, we're just going to have everything spied on. And that's complete control, right? Once they are able to analyze everything you do, know your patterns, know the way you live your life, they can easily decide whether you're a risk, and that could mean a risk to their propaganda machine, right? Which is what I am on Facebook, right? I'm a risk to the standard propaganda, so now they've shadow banned me in a lot of ways. That's what's going on here on YouTube, right? What the stuff I talk about, these topics are a risk to the ruling elite's talking points. They're acceptable thoughts you're allowed to have. And so now they don't recommend my videos, or they desubscribe you. So it's not just, I'm just saying, it's not just Alexa. You can't just be like, I don't have Alexa in my home, I'm safe. It's far more complicated than that, and we got to start standing up for ourselves and fighting back. So,
but you know, none of you protested outside of my trial. My own mother didn't even write an angry letter or anything. She just felt like, you know, the system is too powerful, these oligarchs are too powerful. She doesn't even want to raise a fuss. So nobody's there for us. You know, nobody's standing up for us. Now, Lee is trying to stand up on a more vague kind of scale, but it doesn't do anything for us at our local levels. They're able to just expand their control and their ability to punish people who raise legitimate concerns. I mean, I was raising a legitimate concern. I wasn't threatening anybody. I mean, it may be a threat. Their actions may create a threat to themselves, but they're doing everything they can to double down on the side of oppression. That's their way of dealing with it. Nobody's dealing with it as in, oh, maybe we should listen to this guy. Maybe we should try to address some of his concerns.
please leave a comment if you want to be entered to win.
So, let's move on to something else here.
He started out as a British Army officer, but went on to become a humanitarian worker who helped save thousands of lives. Through his organisation.
So of course, you know, you've got people who are up to their eyeballs in the oligarchy. They actually fought in wars and did things like that. And then I have to criticize progressives here, people like Lee Camp, who we were just watching, who call this guy and the people who cares who's digging people out of the rubble. I don't care if it was Osama bin Laden out there digging them out of the rubble, other than the fact that they need to pay for their crimes. But what I'm saying is that, you know, my side, progressives, take that and they try to crush movements like this. I mean, this guy was a hero.
Mayday Rescue, James Lemasurier helped set up the White Helmets 6 years ago with funding from the UN and several countries.
It was his idea. He managed to get.
And by the way, while I'm going to constantly, at some point when we finally go up against Trump, if it's Bernie, hopefully, I'm always going to be very negative about the negative things that he does. But he just approved funding for White Helmets. Good on him. But that in no way promotes any of the stupid shit that he does, right? And his whole stupid lifestyle and his whole stupid way of doing stuff.
The funding from British, American, and other governments to put it all together. Got a tremendous amount of help from the Turkish government as well, and they provided an ambulance service, a fire brigade, and really since 2014, for the last 5 years, they have been doing a tremendous job.
But it appears Lemassurier's work may have started to take its toll. Police said he'd recently seen a doctor for stress and was using sleeping pills and antidepressant.
And I would strongly suggest that this guy, he's a tough guy, okay? He's really strong, and I doubt seriously that he suddenly became so depressed that he killed himself while he's running this amazing organization and doing all these great things. Okay, maybe, but I think that there was probably a secret campaign by all the people who don't like what he's doing to kill him. And I'll bet that they set it up, because I see it over and over again. Lee Oswald, all these guys. Can it be a coincidence that they all end up dead?
In the early hours of Monday morning, Lemassurier's body was found outside his apartment building in the Istanbul district of Beyoğlu, but officials say they're still investigating the cause of his death.
I mean, would he go outside the front of his house to kill himself? Wouldn't he just quietly do it inside? I don't buy it.
We came to work around 9 o'clock in the morning, and we heard from our friends that noises were heard from here.
The White Helmets, known officially as Syria Civil Defense, operate mainly in opposition-held territories in the north. They provide rescue and medical services to victims of bombings and airstrikes. The group say they're politically neutral, but the Syrian regime accuses them of aiding
the Syrian regime. Like we would ever listen to anything they ever had to say. All they're interested in is the genocide and the murder and the oppression of people, and that's created a situation where everybody hates them.
Opposition groups. Russia has gone further and has accused Lemasurier of having links to terrorist groups.
Of course they have. Everybody's a terrorist, right? Even a guy who all he's doing is trying to save a few people who've been buried in rubble.
Britain has rejected the accusations, and in 2016 it awarded him a knighthood for services to Syria's civil defence. The White Helmets said in a tweet that Le Messurier's work won't be forgotten by the Syrian people. Shamim Chowdhury, TRT1.
And let's go and check out, well, we'll come back to it, but we're going to go and check out what's going on in Syria. But right now I need we'll come back to that. Let's talk about YouTube and
the R3 collection by Origami Rec unfolds in seconds.
What they're doing.
YouTubers beware. Beginning December 10th, your channel could be removed, access revoked, and effectively banned at the sole discretion of YouTube, which of course is owned by Google. A new terms of service was sent out by the video platform just a few days ago, and in it there's a line that reads, YouTube may terminate your access or your Google account's access to all or part of the service if YouTube believes in its sole discretion that provision of the service to you is no longer commercially viable. Ominous words there. So for more on this, let's turn to investigative journalist Ben Swan. Okay, Ben, so that sounds kind of sketchy to me.
It's very sketchy.
YouTube gets to be the sole decision maker, or in the words of George W. Bush, you know, the decider,
right,
on whether or not someone's channel can stay up.
Sure.
But
which they've always been.
How do they define, though, commercially viable?
Well, that's what's interesting about this. The terms of service, and by the way, YouTube had sent out an email to content creators previous to this that kind of laid out some of the new terms of service. This was interestingly omitted from that email. It was not included in there. And so now that it's been spotted, you know, it's getting a lot of attention, and YouTube's like, it's not a big deal. It's a very big deal. And the reason it's a big deal is because essentially what YouTube is saying is that if your channel does not make money, we can take it down because we can't advertise on it. Okay, that's the first issue. But the second issue is, and this is what no one else is talking about, is that YouTube has been on a mission essentially for the last couple of years of demonetizing channels, right? They don't outright ban channels, but they demonetize them, essentially saying that the content on your channel is not suitable for advertisers. Well, when you start getting those little flags on your channel that essentially say that your content's, and by the way, my channel constantly gets these, that your content is not suitable for advertisers, not because it's violent, not because it's hateful, but because you talk about things that maybe their mainstream advertisers like pharmaceutical companies might not like. Now you're not suitable for advertisers. Well, now they've taken it a step further to say, and this is the way I'm reading this, if your channel is not suitable for advertisers, then we can take it down.
We're just going to
delete it completely.
So, like you said, they're saying, it's not a big change. A YouTube spokesperson claims essentially that they're just making these tweaks to the TOS. They're not changing the way the platform works or how they collect data or changing any settings.
True.
But this broad language, you know, provides an opportunity, Ben, for them to clamp down on free speech, doesn't it?
Well, it absolutely does. And they're right when they say we're not changing any, access to the site. We're not really changing any of the rules. It basically operates the way it always has. But what they are changing is the expectation. And here's the expectation. When YouTube came along years ago, over a dozen years ago, the early adopters of YouTube were people who would go on there and say, look, I can't create content in order to, put this on broadcast television. That's why it was called YouTube, right? The whole idea was you can create a channel and you can create content.
Everybody
it can be funny, silly, serious, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can make these channels. What's interesting is since Google has bought it and the kind of the process Google has been in now for some time, not only do they significantly restrict channels, but they also have terms of service that make it increasingly difficult for content creators to create anything at all. So you have these certain channels, right? If you have over 100,000 subscribers to your channel, you can go to YouTube's studios and you can shoot your shows or your podcasts from their studios. But a lot of these new content creators don't have the ability to grow channels the way that they used to. And so the whole thing is gamed specifically for larger channels with large followings who create the kind of content that YouTube likes. They like gaming content, they like makeup tutorials, they like, you know, like fun, silly stuff. Anything serious, anything newsworthy, anything that challenges the status quo, YouTube wants it gone.
They like that little boy that does all the toys, Ryan.
Kids who open boxes
They like
love
Ryan.
that stuff. Yes.
Now, back to the same argument that you and I have discussed over and over about Facebook, about YouTube.
That's right.
Is it a publisher or is it something else?
Right. Well, is it a publisher or is it a platform? If it's a platform, then you don't have the right to remove everyone from your platform, right? You are creating the platform. And I think you can make an ethical argument that says, even if you are a platform and someone is creating content that is not commercially viable, the terms of service for YouTube have never been, can you make us money?
Yeah.
Essentially, what you're saying as YouTube now is that not only are we the lords of this space, right, but we're essentially creating a tax system, a taxation system, where if you create content that we deem as worthless or not valuable to us, we'll remove you and make room for someone else. Who does it harm for a content creator to be on there and not be able to make money?
Right. What if you're another 5-year-old that's not Ryan,
right,
and is unboxing presents or whatever,
and people don't watch your videos?
Like,
and what does that cost YouTube? It doesn't cost YouTube anything. So what this really is about, it's not about the people who are unboxing or who don't make money. It's about the next step in the demonetization strategy that says, first we demonetize information that we don't like, and the next thing we'll do is say, you're not commercially viable, so it doesn't sound like they're politically biased, and they remove you for that reason, when in fact, they're actually removing you because corporate overlords are saying to YouTube, we want them gone.
Yeah, it is always a slippery slope, and you and I are...
And I would say that it's more than that. I mean, let's go here. And here. Let me go to my channel and actually look at this broadcast. Now, I have given up trying to promote my own show. I have nearly 1,000 people on Facebook who keep up with, and here. Okay, you're going to hear me. Let me turn this down. But, like, I can go on here and I can say, share this on Facebook, my live stream right now. And let's say that I share it to my group, which has nearly 1,000 people. Progressive News. And I'll post to it. So right now I have shared to Progressive News. If I do this, you will see here, I just now sent this out to 1,000 people. I mean, it's pretty close. 950. And here we are. I've got 47 subscribers on YouTube. I've got one person watching. Now, that's me. Is that nuts? You're telling me I can't get anybody with between Facebook and YouTube to watch my show? And I advertise it constantly, you know, through Facebook. So I'm convinced, like Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore says, that they're actually squashing me through their system. So all I'm trying to say is that we need a YouTube that doesn't squash anybody, that it's just a system, a non-profit system, a utility, and it's not governed by anybody, it's governed by the law. So anything that comes up, you take it to the judicial system and you get it, you look at it there, right? And we take, but first obviously we have to create a justice system instead of the injustice system that we've got. There should be one for social networking, basic communications between all of us, like Facebook. There should be one for video, news channels, whatever you want to create, anything. And there should be one for audio. So like I don't know, iTunes and Spotify and one of those that's completely free for us to use. And the only thing that interferes with anybody in there is the legal system, where you can take it to a legal system if you got a problem. And one for text, for documents, you know. Kind of like what I'm showing you right now. It could be documentation like that, or in this case it's video. So a video tube, an audio tube, a document tube. And you should probably be able to combine them all into your social media and work there. And it should be absolutely transparent and free. And you should be able to do it. I mean, yeah, sure, somebody's got to pay for it in the end, but through our tax dollars. And maybe it can pay for itself. YouTube pays for itself, you know. So maybe it can be designed to you know, act like a YouTube or a Facebook or what all. But yeah, maybe it can fund itself, right? I mean, they're obviously working models within the capitalist system. And if you've ever watched me before, you'll know that I talk about how, well, non-profits will destroy capitalists. So like if there's a free YouTube, a free Spotify, a free Facebook, then just by virtue of the fact that they're non-profit, they'll put everybody else out of business, right? Because it's a more it's going to be available cheaper through our taxes, but it'll still be cheaper to pay for than the profit version of it, and people will just stop using the profit. Everybody will just switch over eventually.
Always talking about this. I feel like it's never going to end.
Always waving the flag.
I was going, wait a minute. That's not
right.
okay.
Yep.
Like, what if my kid wants to have a channel?
Let them have it.
Just let them have it, YouTube.
Yeah.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Ben Swan, appreciate you.
Monday.com is a team management tool that changed my life because my day used to be wasted on the marketing meeting, carefully reminding Jessica of her deadline, searching for the latest version. Is that final or?
So
I don't
Pramila
give a shit
Jayapal
about Jessica.
Made some comments here on CNN about the issue of Medicare for All that I think are wonderful because it flips the dynamic on its head. A dynamic that is unfortunately too pervasive in mainstream media. The argument they make is, oh my God, what about freedom of choice? If you do Medicare for all, you have no more choice. Now, fundamentally, I think the whole conversation of choice when it comes to health insurance is a little ridiculous because it's like saying, I want to have a choice to determine which mafia is going to rip me off. Because that's what the for-profit health insurance companies are. They're a mafia. They provide no value. They're just a middleman between you and your doctor, and they're price gouging.
Well, not only that, but what about all the people who have no choice because they don't have anything? They don't have a stake in that system.
So, on the one hand, like, the whole choice argument is ridiculous. But on the other hand, there is an area where choice matters, and that choice is for your doctor. Nobody wants to take away your choice for a doctor. Nobody. So here's Pramila Jayapal addressing this argument of, oh, you want to take away choice with Medicare for all. Here's what she says.
So help me understand how you respond to that concern that you're forcing people to do something they may not want to do.
Yeah. Well, I would just say we don't have choice today. Even if you have government, even if you have private insurance, what choice do you really have? You don't have a choice of what plan you pick. Your employer chooses that. You don't have a choice of what benefits are there. Your private insurance company chooses that. In fact, more and more, because of the rising healthcare costs, insurance companies are limiting who you get to see, what hospital is in network or out of network. And if you lose your job, you really have no choice at all. You got no health insurance. That's if you have insurance now. If you don't have insurance, what choice do you have now? So if that's choice, then I would rather have the choice of having a guaranteed insurance plan no matter where you work. You want to start a small business? You want to run a small business? You want to...
And I'll tell you something. Get ready, people. Get ready, because if we get Medicare for all, that's just the beginning. Then it's going to be getting all the doctors, all the administrators, whoever they are, because they're going to have to be re-employed into the system, maybe. I wouldn't want to, but, I mean, it's coming down to what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to go out and train all our own new doctors, build our own new hospitals, put in our own Medicare people as administrators, because guess what? Do you think these people are really going to cooperate? Do you think doctors who make $1 million a year are going to cooperate when they're faced with just making $250,000 a year, right? They think they're all gods, You ever watch Patch Adams? When he says, oh wait, no, that was something else. Where was that? Oh, that was same guy though, Robin Williams, in that movie with Matt Damon's, where he was talking to the guy. You think you're a mathematical god? These people are narcissists. They're not going to cooperate. We're going to have to either find a way to get them to cooperate, or make them cooperate, or get new people. Because if you make them cooperate, then they're going to do everything they can to sabotage the system. The whole point would be to make the system look so bad that they could convince people that it was a mistake to ever do it. So, if we ever get Medicare for all, trust me, it's just the beginning of the fight, because we're going to have to fight all the millions of Americans who are quite comfortable with the status quo. Okay, and they're going to want it back. It's just like what's happening in Venezuela. Okay, they won. They beat the scummy, greedy capitalists, but now the capitalists are working in the system trying to make it look as bad as possible, sabotaging it, even being traitors to their own country. They're even accepting funding from the United States. That would be like me accepting funding from Russia to sabotage something in the United States to make it look bad enough that we could convince the people that it was a mistake to ever have it.
Is there going to be a general election in 2021 in Syria?
Yeah, definitely.
And will there be...
Now, I'm not even going to allow that guy's face on again. You know, I'm really not religious at all, but when I see his face, I just cringe. I mean, absolutely, it's like I'm it's like I'm a prophet and I'm highly sensitive to evil, and when I see his face, it's just like burning me or freezing me with the evil oozing out of it. Of course there's not going to be any kind of fair election in Syria. If there is, it'll be run from the Turkish side, and we will have to get all the people inside the beast Bashar is what I call him, because he is. He's like the beast Raban from Dune, you know. And we'll have to find a way, if at all, to get the people inside his controlled areas, controlled by tanks and planes and barrel bombs, and what do you call it? Anyway, you know, his thugs. Get them into a position to where they will vote their conscience rather than out of fear vote for the beast Bashar, because nobody in their right minds, except for the few who are completely satisfied with the complete oppression of the 20 million Sunnis in the country, the vast majority of the people, are going to vote for him. And that's what the only voting that's gone on has been. It's been, they have limited the voting to the people who support him. And it's pretty simple, right? And it's pretty easy to see. And I just won't even watch this.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is set to meet US President Donald Trump at the White House on November 13. Here's all you need to know what they're going to talk about.
Okay, and of course I've seen what they have to talk about, and basically Trump is dancing around. He really doesn't like Erdogan or Turkey. But let's see what's happening in Turkey. So there's not much on here today, but the war continues. Erdogan and Turkey are trying to expand this area. Of course, they've come up with heavy resistance from the beast Bashar and SDF, YPG, whatever, PKK, who are fighting like crazy to control what's basically Sunni territory. You know, some of these areas have a lot of Kurds in them, but honestly I doubt seriously that they support the YPG or the SDF. And yeah, the war continues. Syrians try to they don't want Sunnis out from under their control. You know, they want absolute control, absolute oppression and propagandization. Now the Syrians themselves continue to fight back. This is where they blew off a bomb, and you know, they're limited because they're up against people with tanks and barrel bombs and, like I said, all that kind of stuff. And of course Idlib's just a massive clusterfuck. You've got the millions who haven't been able to escape into Turkey, and mainly because Turkey's shut off its borders to them, because they've just decided they can't take anymore. And they've set up these zones. This is from Operation, I forget what it was called. But anyway, they took over all this, and they're setting up refugees in here, but they're limited to that. And they're doing their best to try and help out in here, but I think, well, obviously these people are not under anybody's protection. These are Turkish observation points, but I have yet to see Turkey really. They're just not willing to get right into a huge war. They're trying to do it diplomatically with, a lot of military, kind of the threat of force. But they're just doing it like that. And I have to give Erdogan a lot of credit, and I have to give the Turkish people a lot of credit. They put up with nearly 4 million Turkish refugees spread out in camps all across here. And, let's face it, Europe doesn't want them. And they're trying to figure out a way to make it work best they can. Now, I'm not going to say that everybody in Turkey has, good intentions, but overall, they are the local actors who I've said should be involved. Iraq, of course, controlled by Iran at this point. Kind of controlled by Iran and the United States. Isn't that a nice combination? So I'm not going to go on and on about Syria, but I'm going to tell you right now the horror created by this guy, the Beast Bashar, who's just not willing to step down and is willing to go to, he makes Hitler look like a nice guy. He really does. And he thinks that he can just keep on doubling down, quadrupling down until he controls all of Syria. And he's forced everybody out, and you would not want to be a Sunni living in any of these areas. His father killed 60,000 in Hama way back when, and it's just like what I talk about in my group. It's called and you can go here on Facebook and see for yourself. I haven't added anything for a long time, but it doesn't matter. Just come here and go through the posts. Wonderful posts, amazing posts. If you go here and you see everything in here, Russia dropping a vacuum bomb, that's the equivalent of a small nuke. Russia's just using Syria as a place to test its weapons and its tactics. That's all. And if you go through here far enough, you'll run into some amazing stories. This one right here.
This is Democracy Now!, Democracy Now!
And it's a whole hour long, but let's go here so that you can see. Now, when you listen to Jimmy Dore, and his bullshit about Syria and Tulsi Gabbard. Think about this.
Attack. Artino was one of the people that joined the initial uprising very early on. He became a kind of media activist. You know, he would film the uprising. If the security forces fired on protesters, he would film it and post it online. And he eventually, you know, was sought after by the regime. He was arrested a couple of times. And instead of fleeing the country, he left Damascus to the suburb of eastern Ghouta, where his family had a summer home. There he could kind of lay low. The area was under control of the opposition at that time, and became under control of the armed opposition as the armed opposition grew. So it was, for a while, a kind of liberated zone in some ways. He described it as you know, feeling free there in a way he had never felt before in Syria. The war intensified between rebels there and the regime essentially cordoned off Ghouta. They were not letting food in and out, and the conditions got more and more dire. And eventually, late one night, there was a sarin attack. Roughly 1,400 people were killed. And Artino, at that point, was working as a photographer. He had met a photojournalist who trained him and got him a job at Reuters. So he was essentially covering Ghouta for Reuters. And the morning after the chemical attack, he went to the hospitals and mosques and schools where people were being brought who were victims of the attack. And the situation he described, combined with the videos that I've seen online.
Now, when you see stuff out of Jimmy Dore and other people who talk about how this is all fake and it's just propaganda, that's nonsense. And the OPCW, that's nonsense. Saying that they're like making shit up and stuff, nonsense. Absolute nonsense. The only reason they left out one guy's claims that the canisters might have been moved is because that would throw off the truth of the massive amount of evidence that the Syrian, the beast Bashar was responsible.
It was just
and the Russian government.
Absolutely horrific. He is going into rooms that are just full of dead children on the floor. He's seeing people that are seem to be kind of hallucinating or delusional. They're repeating the same thing over and over. Doctors and nurses are getting infected, and he himself, when he was trying to take a photo of a child, he lost consciousness. The sarin was just it was impacting everyone that were around, even just the bodies of the people who had been in the zone of the attack. He was given atropine, which is an antidote, so he survived. And he described that period of time when, after the attack, people expected that there would be a U.S. response because Obama had made his famous red line statement. And he described the day that Obama made a speech shortly after the chemical attack. It was very anticipated. Ghouta didn't have electricity, but people had generators, and people bought fuel to be able to watch the speech and gather on televisions. And Obama had, been having domestic kind of battles with Republicans, and Republicans were against him striking in Syria. And he announced that he was going to seek congressional approval. And in Ghouta, the way that Artino described it, people were very disappointed. They just couldn't believe that they went through this horror and there was going to be no kind of response. And Ghouta left the headlines, but Artino lived there for a long time after, and the siege tightened. He lost many, many pounds. He, was repeatedly injured. People were starving to death. It just became very grim. And at the same time, the rebels, were overtaken by Islamist groups. So he was not only having to deal with the siege, but Islamist groups who were also.
So you see, the oppression of the people leads to. Radical militants taking over. It's not like the war is against radical militants, it's against the people. But in the end, they're left with no choice.
Kidnapping activists and, disappearing some of the most famous activists in the Syrian opposition.
I want to ask you about these gas attacks, and you write extensively about them, but how you know where these attacks have come from. The State Department has said that the Syrian government may have used chemical weapons during recent fighting in Idlib. The State Department warning the United States and its allies would respond quickly and appropriately if it's determined that chemical weapons have been used. And this all...
And, I have to say that this argument that the Beast Bashar doesn't need to use chemical weapons, no, it's a terrorist. It's a terrorism. It's the effect of terrorizing the people. And maybe now he doesn't have to. Now after he's taken over and the Russians bombed the shit out of everybody and conventional weapons have done the job, maybe now he doesn't have to use these chemical weapons. And I have to say, Russia has all the chemical weapons he needs. Okay? So all they have to do is hand a few over and then they get used. He also has the capability of producing as much chlorine as he wants. He's got chemical factories and he can do it anyway. But the argument that he doesn't need to use chemical weapons is bullshit. And the fact that he can get away with it most of the time, all the more reason for him to use them. He hasn't used them lately because they control most of the country and they don't want to attract any more bad press.
Coming as questions have been raised about, an alleged chemical weapons attack in the city of Douma last year. The Syrian government was accused of dropping 2 gas cylinders on the city, killing dozens of people. The U.S. and allies responded by carrying out airstrikes. But a newly leaked internal document from the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, OPCW, reveals there were conflicting views within the OPCW as to what happened.
There was one guy who said the canisters had been moved. Now, maybe so, I'm sure that they wanted to clean up the chemicals, but the fact is they had, listen to what he has to say.
Leaked documents suggesting the cylinders were manually placed on the ground and were not dropped from the air. This led some observers to conclude the chemical attack might have been staged by Syrian rebels. The leaked document appears to contradict the official OPCW findings on what happened in Douma. In its official report, the organization said it had found, quote, reasonable grounds that the use of a toxic chemical as a weapon had taken place on April 7, 2018. So talk about how you track who is responsible for these gas attacks, of which, and you clearly document this in your extensive piece, there have been hundreds.
Yeah. So the original sarin attack, for example, this one I was describing in Ghouta in 2013, there was a UN team that investigated afterwards, and the UN team was not actually their mission was not to determine who was responsible, to determine what the attack was, what the substance was. They determined that it was sarin. I spoke to the head of the team, and in their report, while they're not saying who launched the attack, they clearly lay out where the the sarin was launched from. They showed that it was, the head of the inspection team told me it was high-grade sarin. This is not the kind of sarin that you can make at home. And it was launched from the direction of a military site on Qasioun Mountain on the outside of Damascus. When you add up all of these factors and try to imagine a scenario in which some other group is launching it, you have somehow, a rogue group that's making military-grade sarin that's sneaking into an area controlled by the government, launching a weapon on its own side, and escaping without being caught. This kind of scenario repeats over and over when you look at these chemical attacks, where the scenario in which they're not launched by the Syrian government is almost outside of reason. Then later, after this attack, other attacks have been documented much more extensively. The attack in Khan Sheikhoun was studied by the UN, and they did assign responsibility.
They said it was
the Syrian government. And it's important to also note that while there have been maybe 2 or 3 attacks that have gotten a lot of attention, they've been really picked apart, Russia has been a major actor in casting doubt on this. Russia is an ally of the Syrian government. There have been hundreds of chemical attacks in Syria. Most of these are chlorine attacks, not sarin attacks, that have been extensively studied. There was a recent study that came out that showed that the vast majority of these, and we're talking over 95% of these, have been launched by the Syrian government. There have been some launched by ISIS, specifically a mustard and possibly one sarin attack.
Well, one of the things that you point out in the piece is that, there's no other war in recent memory that has been subject to so many disinformation campaigns and so many conspiracy theories. And coming at this point from all quarters, as you said, the Russians and the Assad government itself, that the Assad government doesn't have the reach that Russian media do, refuting
the beast Bashar. That's how they should really address him.
Number of these international organizations that have reported on these attacks, and then simultaneously groups in the West, certain groups claiming that a lot of these attacks are in fact false flag operations, and that these are all a pretext to get the U.S. to militarily intervene, including
these are Baathists. Saddam Hussein was a Baathist. He gassed the Kurds. They have an undeniable record. Just on that, you should assign the blame to, Baathists.
Republican news site, former Congressmember Ron Paul, who also claimed that the Ghouta attack was a false flag operation. Now,
so you got a fucking chicken shit piece of shit from my state who talks shit all the time, and he's backing bullshit conspiracies. I don't see how anybody can doubt it. And you got guys like Jimmy Dore, and they end up being so on the wrong side that they almost discredit themselves in all ways, even though they're promoting I have to say Jimmy Dore promotes just about everybody over Bernie Sanders. So his girl who sat down with the beast Bashar, and I understand that he's on a hard left side, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate him and other people being on that side. But why taint yourself with this nonsense and support a genocidal madman?
Obviously, there's some justification given the claims that the U.S. made about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction, and arguably the decision that the U.S. made to go into to invade Iraq is in fact what's given rise to ISIS and spawned these wars, at least one of the main reasons. But could you comment on what you think? I mean, the complexity of the war is there. So many different actors are involved. What do you think accounts for the fact that there's so many conflicting reports from so many conflicting different quarters about what's actually happening in Syria and who's responsible for what?
I mean, at this point in the war, and in the last at least several years, the war has become so entrenched, and people on the outside are so invested on different sides of the war that people are fighting the ground war, and people outside are fighting an information war. And for so many people, what is happening in Syria is not, necessarily about fact. It's about winning. And I think for a lot of people, it's also not about Syrians. Syria is a full proxy war. And I think, I don't know if we've had a conflict like this where it's not only a literal proxy war, but it just the ripples go so far. I mean, you can find major divisions just within the American left about the Syrian war, and this is all over the world. It's just it reaches, I think, farther than we can even realize. And in some ways, I think these points that people kind of focus in on, like particular chemical attacks, they're also just places that we can kind of fight these battles with each other. But in some ways, they are maybe not as relevant as we make them. I mean, the last study of civilian casualties in Syria was 2016, and that put them at 500,000.
And the vast majority of whom have been killed by conventional weapons.
Yes, and studies have shown that around 85% of civilian deaths have come from the Assad regime. This doesn't mean that groups like ISIS or Nusra or the Free Syrian Army are absolved of any of their crimes or any of their atrocities. These are just the facts of the situation, and whether...
Yeah, so, Jimmy Dore, the Gray Zone, they've ruined themselves. With all the great work they do on Venezuela and Nicaragua and what's going on in South America, they've ruined themselves with this point. And why? Because they want to support the hard left, and I hate to say it, but the hard left very often gets these things wrong. They're not there. They don't have to face the reality of chemical attacks. They're just sitting on the outside, and they want to support whoever will help them in their fighting for the rights of people in South America and in Palestine. And I get that, but you don't have to go there. You don't have to go to supporting chemical attacks on people, trying to say that they're conspiracy theories. So just when you thought the Beast Bashar couldn't be any worse, this lady says the Beast Bashar worked with ISIS to terrorize the rebels and the people of Aleppo. Another Democracy Now! Program. And the OPCW is going to be coming out with a number of reports over the next year. And we'll see what else they have to say about it. Let's see where the I've covered a piece about the guy who created the white helmets. Let's see what they had to say here.
Turkey accused the Syrian government today of deliberately firing on soldiers at an observation post who were keeping watch over Idlib province, the last territory outside of Bashar al-Assad's control.
The beast Bashar.
About half of the estimated 3 million people there are refugees, and Turkey's border is the closest escape. To prevent millions from rushing in, Turkey brokered a ceasefire deal with Russia in September. But that deal's mostly fallen apart.
الخوف موجود بس ما الخوف اللي بيخليك انه تدير ظهرك وتمشي. الخوف مثلا ممكن.
Who cares if that guy's a terrorist? He's not a terrorist while he's trying to dig people out of the rubble.
انه مثلا انت هيك تنقز او تهديك لمدة ثانيتين ثلاثة وبعدين تمشي. ليش؟ لانه انت يعني انت شايف عينك مدني عم بينادي لك. يعني مدني انت شايفك انت الملاك اللي جاي تقيمه من نص النار من نص العتم. فمستحيل انه انت تخاف انه ما حيجي من قلبك انت تخاف تتركه والله وتهرب.
Muayyad al-Hafi is one of just a few hundred white helmets left in Idlib. There were once thousands of these volunteer first responders who stepped up when state agencies failed.
Allahu Akbar.
But Assad's forces and his Russian allies have started dropping bombs. In the last 2 months in Idlib, at least 380 people have been killed.
And the map is like this every day, but I have to say there's just even more. I mean, every single one of these, and there's more than that. Just in the last 24 hours, bombs dropped and civilians killed.
And there have been 25 attacks on hospitals. The white helmets are often targeted. The regime employs a double hit tactic. It will bomb an area, and when the paramedics come, bomb it again.
الله أكبر الله أكبر. هلا الشعور هون بيكون معلم إنه بين خوف إنه قديش في عالم تحت الأنقاض، هل رح يكون في استهداف ثاني؟ هل في عالم كثير مصابة؟ وأنت في ألف فكرة براسك، يعني أنت فكرة إنه أنت رح توصل لمكان ضربة أو لا حتى.
The white helmets say they've saved more than 116,000 people, but the Syrian regime considers them enemies of the state.
White helmets are Al-Qaeda. They are Al-Qaeda members.
بالمسيطرة النظام على الغوطة في شباب
He makes me sick to my stomach.
مدني بقيت ففي منهم اختفوا، يعني في شخص أنا بعرفه إنه اختفى نهائي ما حدا بيعرف عنه شيء، وبقية الشباب اللي ضلت يعني 90% أو 100% منهم صاروا عساكر هلا مع الجيش.
Muayyad believes they were coerced into joining, and that if he were ever captured, the army would force him to fight, or worse.
إذا لا قدر الله سيطر النظام على إدلب يعني مصيرنا نحن معروف، يعني النظام إذا مسك حد منا عايش فمصيره القتل، يعني الاعتقال بعد القتل أكيد، يعني مستحيل يتعامل مع شخص يعني مو بس كدفاع مدني ككل مجالات الثورة، بس دفاع مدني بوجه الأخص إنه هو كان يعني.
So he's saying that, you know, if Bashir takes over Idlib, they're all dead, and he's right.
يعني أكثر مؤسسة عم تكشف جرائمه.
He might believe that, but the regime and its Russian allies don't. Their propaganda accuses the white helmets of fabricating footage.
هدول ولادك. شنو هذا؟ لا أنا ماني متجوزة يا أخي، أنا أنسى.
All during the month of Ramadan, this series, shot in Damascus, portrayed the White Helmets as crisis actors who stage massacres. The regime is advancing towards the extremist group controlling Idlib, determined to...
So the Bashar and the Russians have made movies depicting the White Helmets as faking all this stuff.
Take them out.
لا حتى لا قدر يعني إذا سقطت بالكامل المنطقة كاملة فيعني الحل الوحيد باين عنه هو الخروج لتركيا عن طريق الشيء النظامي أو التهريب.
But that's not an option right now. The Turkish border is closed.
شيء أكيد هذا الشيء يعني إنه بضل قلبي عندهم بس يعني أنا عندي إياهم مثلهم مثل بقية العالم يعني مثل ما هن أهلي بقية العالم لهم أهل كمان.
My God. You know, anybody who was actually having to face this and deal with this, they wouldn't give the beast Bashar an inch, right? And how tempting would it be to turn to terrorism, to terrorize? I mean, I have to say that every day when I see this map, I hope to see right here. I hope to see, a suicide bomber blows himself up and blows up the beast Bashar. Or the people rise up in this area and people come to fight. And everybody talks about foreign fighters, but man, they're just people who are fed up with seeing these people just oppressed and murdered, and they rush there to fight on that side. They're not terrorists. Somebody in Germany who sees the horror here is just somebody who has a conscience, and they just can't sit and ignore it. And then Germany calls him a terrorist and doesn't want to accept them back into Germany. He's going to be a threat. Well, first of all, I doubt that. But if he is a threat, it's because Germany is culpable in many ways for what's going on. So... So this is a picture of a prison in the Beast Bashar's area, and they're executing people. Systematic torture. And eventually we'll get to that. Reports that 95 detainees were executed today in Sidnea prison. This is about the United States and the Kurds and their horror that they inflicted upon the people. And when they did that, of course, with the help of the United States, they took over all of this, and they took most of the people, the Sunni Syrians, and stuck them all in prison camps and in prisons, and have in a way just created exactly what we've got now, where Turkey feels like they have to invade and try and do something about this ridiculous mess. The United States supporting the Kurds, who they're trying to cut out a homeland for them, which, yeah, they deserve and they need, but taking it away, that's all we ever do. We just, if we help anybody, so we helped the Jews, and they kicked everybody out of their land, and I was in Lebanon, and I saw how that worked out, and the Palestinians created a problem in Lebanon. The Christian Lebanese decided they were going to slaughter them all, and in Jordan, where they created a problem, and the king of Jordan decided he was going to just wipe them out, and in Egypt, and in Syria, they're there, and most of them will flock to the beast Bashar, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them aren't willing to take a payoff that doesn't help the rest of the Palestinian refugees in here. And so a lot of the Palestinian refugees fight on the side of the Sunnis. So and it just results in more and more horror on the ground. And the Syrian civilians, the Sunnis mainly, and Kurds and Christians all pay the price. And the Intercept came to the same conclusion I did, that maybe the canisters were moved, but the canisters still fell through the roof of this building and went off, whether they were moved or not. This was a meme that I made. If you get caught not celebrating your liberation in Syria, and here we get to this one. Let's watch this.
In a shocking new report on Syria, Amnesty International says as many as 13,000 people have been hanged in a Syrian government military prison between 2011 and 2015. Amnesty calls the hangings part of a deliberate policy of extermination. The group says the majority of the 13,000
genocide
people hanged were civilians opposed to the Assad regime. This is Amnesty International's Lynn Malouf.
The new findings in this report are about a systematic campaign of mass hangings, whereby every week, usually on Mondays and Wednesdays, groups of detainees, of between 20 to 50 detainees, would be taken from their cells, told that they would be transferred to civilian detentions. But instead of that, they were taken to a cell in another building inside of Sidnaya, where they would be hanged.
The Israeli parliament has approved a highly contentious bill.
So, if you didn't know enough about Syria, now you do. All right? And, if you don't understand what's going on, it just goes to show you how important broadcasts like mine are. People need to learn the truth. How do you deal with a deteriorating world? In a lot of ways it's deteriorating. Obviously in a lot of ways it's not. But how do you determine who's right and who's wrong and what's really happening if you don't have people like me doing shows like like mine, huh? So into the night we zoom. And we are zooming. And I'm telling you, you may feel like you can escape all this horror that's going on around the world, but sooner or later, if we don't do anything about it, it will engulf us all. And I have to say that Bernie Sanders is my greatest hope of avoiding this, and that's why I support him and the progressive movement in general. It may have its flaws, you know, it may have its hard left that, like Jimmy Dore, who somehow managed to find a way to support the beast Bashar. I mean, how is that? That's such a dichotomy. I mean, it's totally out of whack. But aside from that, the progressive movement is our only hope right now. And I have to say that, you know, this song really represents the fact that the world will find balance, and human beings inside of it will find balance, and everybody will end up paying for what they do, one way or another. I don't think there's any way to escape that. Everything I've seen in my 58 years, going on 59, this December 27th, my birthday, has shown me that it does find balance, and that it's constantly working to create that balance, which is justice and social justice, and we'll find that. If we don't find it in justice, we'll find it in the justice of just total yin-yang, you know, and I guess we'll grow from there, and maybe the next time around hopefully we won't get to that, but sooner or later we'll find balance. This is Martin Drummond with Progressive News. Hope you enjoyed the broadcast, and I know you didn't see it while it was live because somehow YouTube and Facebook managed a way to oppress my shows, but I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.